Hey everybody, it's Meredith Miller from Inner Integration. Today I want to talk about why the idealization phase of the abuse is so dangerous. First, I just want to say thank you so much for all of the support. I was just blown away by all the comments on the last video that I released, all of the people who said how much that helped them because they were able to see such similar patterns in a relationship that they had. I almost didn't make that video. I really went back and forth on that. I was nervous about putting out something so very personal. And seeing the response now makes me realize I want to do that more often. I want to share more of my own personal life with you in that way so that you can learn from that, because showing real life examples seemed to be what really moved the needle for a lot of people. So thank you again for all of your support. So today I want to talk about this idealization, right? Because the idealization is like the fun part of it all, right? Like that's the part that feels good. It's the part that is not recognizable as the abuse. It's the devaluation that's the more hurtful part. That's the more obvious part of the abuse because it's cruel, it's mean, it might be biting criticism, heavy fear propaganda used to control your behavior, like those little double entendre little digs that they put in there. That sort of stuff is more obvious that it's not okay. So remember, the abuse cycle is both the idealization and the devaluation. It's part of the whole cycle. This is one of the most important things to understand. These are the manipulators' primary styles of interaction. They're pretty much always either idealizing you or devaluing you, and they have many tools in each of those boxes. And also remember, it doesn't always look the same from abuser to abuser. If you've met more than one of these types, you might recognize that like the idealization phase and the devaluation phase were kind of different from person to person. So the IND, the idealization and devaluation, are known as the two phases of the abuse cycle, aka the sweet, mean cycle. I did a video on this last year, a little over a year ago, I think. It was called The Big Picture. If you haven't seen that yet, I recommend watching it. I'm going to put the link in the video description below. Why is that important to see? Because it's like you have to get this in order to free yourself from the trap of the cognitive dissonance. Because I hear a lot from people, well, they're really not a narcissist or abuser because sometimes they're a really good person and sometimes it really seems like they're changing. That's how it works. Okay, if they were an asshole all the time, it would be obvious. The trick wouldn't work. That's why the idealization is so important to the abuse cycle. That's why it's so dangerous. So recognize too that it's two phases, right? The idealization and the devaluation. Yet the funny thing is they're both often happening in each phase to different degrees. It's just that the devaluation at the beginning during the more idealization phase is a lot more subtle. There's a lot more plausible deniability. There's smaller little digs, there's smaller little things. It's just a lot more subtle, but it's still going on under the surface. And then towards the end, when you're like in the heavy devaluation phase, the idealization is still used, mostly only when they want to pull you back in. Like when they sense that you're moving away, that you're withdrawing, that you're taking away the narcissistic supply, you're not giving them that reaction that they want. That's when they'll start idealizing you again to start to pull you back in. So remember, at the beginning, the idealization might be subtle. Like the love bombing is not always over the top. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it just might be like some little flattery, which you might perceive as genuine compliments or just subtle signs of approval or kindness. Remember, the Stockholm Syndrome, which is the trauma bond, works on this intermittent reinforcement. I love you not. I approve you, I disapprove you. And this back and forth creates a stronger bond. This is well known. For example, in the pickup artist community, there's a book called The Game. There's another book called The Mystery Method. There's probably a lot more out there. And essentially what they're teaching men to do, and again, I'm not saying all these abusers are men, okay? I'm just saying the whole pickup artist thing is generally teaching men how to trick women and essentially to get them caught in this intermittent reinforcement to create a strong bond with them, right? But when you add on top of that intermittent reinforcement abuse, that's when the trauma bond is created, right? So Even without the outright abuse, it's dangerous because it's manipulative. And the people who do it know what they're doing. It's really important to understand. They know what they're doing. They know if they give you a little bit of idealization and then the devaluation that they've got you hooked into that cycle. So often both the idealization and the devaluation can be used in the same conversation and interaction. And it's often like very subtle at first, especially the more covert the person is. You can be so very subtle. And then the flip-flop is increasingly more intense as the months and years go by. Like, when the stock market is about to crash, that flip-flop, the up and down, it's a lot more intense, like just before the crash, usually. They'll only hurt you, remember, to comfort you, right? So they'll hurt you and then they'll comfort you. They'll feign that they're sorry. They'll do something and then, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Or they get you to take the blame and the responsibility of what happened, and then they forgive you. That kind of thing. Or they'll flatter you only to end that sentence with a subtle little put down. For example, you're so wonderful because blah, blah, blah. And you're also blah, blah. Meaning that you're not good enough, right? Or they give you or do something for you that they know that you'll love, and then they'll guilt trip you into doing something for them. It's the bait and switch. It's the boss who tells you how wonderful you are, how they wish they had more employees like you, how no one works with the same work ethic and dedication. And then Friday at 4 p.m., they show up at your cubicle or your office door and they dump this extra work on you and they ask you to work over the weekend. So essentially they softened you not to be able to say no, because then if you say no, then all those positive things they said about you are null and void. It's the mother who tells you how proud she is of you. She's just so happy for you and your accomplishments. And then she sends you a birthday card with some kind of covert message implying that you should just play it small, right? It's the partner or the friend who tells you nobody gets them like you do. No one has helped them like you do. You're just such an amazing and giving person. They're so lucky to have you in their life. And then they start guilt tripping you into taking responsibility for them and their shit. And then when they refuse to take care of themselves and they try to get you to do it for them, if you don't do it, then it's like everything good that they said about you is null and void. It's the bind. It's how they get you trapped, right? So why is it so dangerous if you don't realize what's going on with the idealization? On the surface, it's confusing. It looks like kindness, approval, compliments, admiration. It sucks you in. It's seduction, but that seduction is not always sexual. It could be, a female friend that tells another female, that she's praising her looks, It could be anybody praising your talents, your qualities, your accomplishments, anything in your life in general that you've done or that you have or that you are. This idealization tempts you to place your sense of approval in the other person. And when you watch that video, The Big Picture, I talk about that, or maybe it was another one actually that I wrote, something about the danger of placing your approval in another person. So say this person's here and they're giving you this approval and they're giving you all these positive things, and then maybe you start to lean into that because it feels good. As soon as this person takes one step away, what happens? You fall flat on your face. That's the whole trick. Right? So that idealization softens your boundaries because it feels good. It feels good to everybody. It turns off your alarm system. So when someone's praising you and then they do something kind of sneaky and tricky right after that, you might not notice it so much because that alarm system got turned off by the feel good. The idealization is used also when you're slipping away, when they sense that you're withdrawing, that you're not giving them that supply that they need, that you just might leave. That's when they're going to start a whole nother round of idealization until they get you in again, and then it flips back to devaluation. So essentially the idealization tricks you into thinking that the abuser has a good side, and it creates this false hope that one day they'll just be that good person, so you stay waiting around for that day that will never come. Right? Or it causes you to miss the good times. And by creating that false hope, you might stay reaching for that carrot on a stick that you'll never get because it just keeps moving. Or you might get hoovered back in even after you've gotten out because you started feeling nostalgic for those good times. I just see this over and over again. That idealization is an inherent part of the trauma bond. When we talk about Stockholm Syndrome, one of the 4 characteristics is a perceived act of kindness. So really, really get that. Like, write it down if you have to. If you're really struggling with that denial, like, put it on little sticky notes, put it on your phone, write it on your bathroom mirror, like something so that you get it into your head. Once you see through the idealization for what it is, it feels so fake and empty, and then you're not fooled by it anymore. So the bottom line is, if you don't fall for the idealization, you won't get trauma bonded. It doesn't mean you're not going to meet one of these people. It doesn't mean you might not see it right away if that person is really covert. But when the devaluation really starts, your alarm system will go off and you'll know that something isn't right. Even if it's really subtle at first, and even if you give them the benefit of the doubt at first, you'll be able to recognize a lot quicker what's going on because you won't be emotionally hooked to the good times or the approval that that person was giving you. If you value yourself, that idealization doesn't knock you off balance. So you'll be able to leave without the pain that you felt in the past with others, without the gravity of the trauma bond, because you're not going to get trauma bonded to that person because you didn't fall for the idealization. So then when the devaluation becomes evident, you're out. Remember, it's not so easy to see at first, especially with those covert types. So essentially, becoming immune to the idealization is how you build antibodies against this insidious virus of narcissistic abuse. So how do you not fall for the idealization? Number 1, stop placing your sense of approval in other people. Stop doing it. Start validating and approving of yourself. Maybe you never had that validation and approval since childhood because you grew up with a narcissistic parent. That wasn't your fault, right? But recognize, like, this is what created your tendency to people please, right? Because you're seeking approval that you didn't get at home, or that you got only occasionally when you were doing what that narcissistic parent wanted you to do, right? So recognize if that's you, and then start giving that approval and that validation to yourself on the daily. Notice your reaction when someone praises you. Okay, how do you feel? And then what's your response, right? So if you notice that you're leaning into that a lot, or if you notice that it really knocks you off center, or you're like, oh my God, right? That kind of reaction, catch yourself doing that and ask yourself, how can you neutralize that? How can you neutralize your response to that, right? So that when someone praises you, you get used to going, thanks, and you don't invest anymore in it. That's how you maintain your immunity. That's how you build antibodies to this kind of abuse. So practice not allowing yourself to get knocked off center when someone praises you, and then you won't get doped up on the idealization, and that will keep your head clear. I'm sending you all a big hug.